Smallworks, the last monthly momentum of 2024. I think many of us are going to be happy to see this year go away. But there are going to be lots of exciting things happening in 2025. Many of you have been hearing me talk about the rezoning processes, all of the policy changes. Oh my God, do we love policy changes? Some of them we love, some of them we don't love so much. And the opportunity to build small multifamily, which was one of the things that brought me to Richard Bell's office. And I know everybody has heard me talk about Richard and Bell Alliance, and so we won't get into that whole love fest again. All needless to say, we're really happy that we found them, and I know many of you have already been connecting to them, and we're going to be doing a lot in the new year. And as promised, one of the things that we wanted to talk about before the end of the year, because we know there's going to be lots of action that we want to get started at the beginning of the year, is taking advantage of how do we build these small multifamilies, sixplexes, eightplexes. And Richard says, well, I've got your guys. You know, we've got gentlemen with a company called Smallworks. It's going to be, we're talking about it, expanding. They're focused in Vancouver at the moment, but we're going to get them on the island as fast as we can. And then we're going to get them out to Moncton to build that small multifamily that we've been promising to do with Darlene. And so Jake Harrison and Luke Fry from Smallworks are here, and they are going to walk us through what Smallworks is and tell us a little bit more. And then Richard is going to give us some updates on the rezoning and some of the things that are going to be working in our future that are going to make us a little bit happier in terms of how we can do co-ownership, co-housing, co-living, and strata. And we're going to touch on some of that. Now, before we jump in, does anybody want to add anything? Have I missed anything? Richard, did you want to add anything about Jake and Luke? Just get straight to it.
So it's Luke Harrison and Jake Fry.
Oh, I do. That's funny. Luke Harrison and Jake Fry. Thanks for that. Awesome.
No problem.
Okay, well, gentlemen, take it away.
Well, Jake Harrison has a ring to it, so I'm not offended. So I'll just give it a little setup for Luke to talk about the current situation by maybe just taking a moment to focus on what has preceded this, which has been a pretty lovely 16 years that we've actually been in existence. So Smallworks started really this on I won't say a whim, but certainly a real gut instinct that this was our direction to go. And we spent a few years setting up a prefab facility and really doing a number of small infill projects that we could do at the time that were legitimate, but really spending a lot of energy advocating for laneway housing, which is now commonly referred to as ADUs, and got that legislation through in the fall of 2009, and subsequently have built well into the 400s of units just in Vancouver alone, in North Vancouver. And really have become, with no modesty at all, but probably the preeminent builder of this housing form. But I think what was really exciting, which connected me with Richard and Luke, was that we really saw how important it was that we really set a course of becoming that practitioner of really using the land mass that we do have in our cities in a more effective way to both address how people are able to get things like equity off their properties, how they're able to accommodate their families, how we're able to even build stronger, more resilient communities. Somewhat of an overused term, but it is genuine in our case that this is perhaps the best method and the easiest method for us to get the level of housing we want in a way that doesn't require municipal support and actually helps and enriches the people who currently own the property. And so our work continued. We started a not-for-profit as well called Small Housing BC, and that voice was one of the main drivers, we feel, to really getting these multi-units in the single-family neighborhoods, which is a natural extension of the success we had with the Laneway House program. And with that, I'll hand it over to Luke, but that's a little background of where Smallworks is and where we're going. So.
Thanks, Jake. So I wanted to just quickly kind of chat about just kind of continue on from what Jake was talking about, which was really about what we can build in single family neighborhoods and on single family lots now versus what we could do 15 years ago, 16 years ago when Jake started out. And really this sort of recognition that we're in a housing crisis in places like Vancouver, but lots of the growing cities across North America, and we have to find more creative ways to create housing in the places that we already have other forms of housing or other forms of built environment established. There's not that many greenfield sites left in places like Vancouver to go build homes. So Jake's really started around this idea of laneway homes, what we could build on people's backyards and on this sort of secondary street frontage, the lane in Vancouver, as this kind of new sort of frontier of possibility for housing development. Where we are now is because of this ongoing change in policy around what you can build in single family neighborhoods. We can build more than lane homes, or sometimes they're called ADUs, in places that don't have lanes, so accessory dwelling units. But increasingly, we're able to build 2, 3, 4, 5 homes on a single family lot, and so these are commonly being called infill or house plexes. So maybe I'll get you to go down to the next slide. So this is really describing sort of an emerging territory for Smallworks. We've, as Jake's mentioned, we've been the sort of largest builder of lane homes and ADUs in Metro Vancouver, and now we have these same clients that own single family lots that are coming forward and saying, well, I thought I wanted a lane home, I thought I wanted an ADU, but maybe I should be building a plex. Maybe there's more that I can be doing on my lot than I originally kind of understood. And the big thing for us, the big aha for us was, what's happening on a regulatory standpoint and a policy level is we're moving to what's called like as of right approval or outright approval, which is it's meaning that it's not necessary for groups like us to go through rezoning or even often now development permit processes, which are lengthy. You've probably heard all the horror stories about how long it takes you to get a development permit or a rezoning done in Vancouver. But as of right, we can build most commonly four homes on a single family lot in Vancouver, and oftentimes up to 6 homes, depending on the size of the lot. But this is all speaking to this kind of this sort of trend of what we call gentle density. And so it's all these forms. It started with the lane home movement in Vancouver. It can be things like pocket neighborhoods, which is, these sort of cottage courtyards that are around sort of centrally pedestrian accessed areas that can be built on 2 or 3 lots. Co-housing is something you'll hear a bit about. Secondary suites, row houses, tiny homes, small lot homes. These are all creative ways, innovative ways to get more sort of multifamily forms in still urban reeds, densities that look a lot like the existing single family neighborhoods, but are providing more housing. So I'll get you down the next slide. And so the reason this is kind of becoming quite interesting in BC is we've kind of always thought about how you get into single family neighborhoods is there's sort of the typical development approach, which is come along with a bag of money, buy these lots, tell these people to move off, and we're going to build a 6-story apartment building or a tower or something else. And there's a lot of people that are in single family neighborhoods that are aware that they are wanting to maybe downsize or think about new housing for themselves, but don't want to leave that neighborhood. And so just selling and getting a bag of cash to move somewhere else isn't always the option. But this idea of how to redevelop these neighborhoods by way of gentle density is something that's very, very appealing to the people that actually own these homes, own these lots. And so what we found is as we work through, we have a sort of an arm's length sort of advocacy group called Small Housing BC, who does a lot of work across British Columbia and now across Canada to really promote these forms of gentle density in single family neighborhoods. And this is really appealing to the people that own these single family neighborhoods. So this barrier of sort of NIMBYism that was really sort of prevalent for higher density forms of housing is just not there when it comes to things like gentle density and plexes and ADUs, because this is something that people actually want within their neighborhoods. And so, like I said, it's because it's appealing. It's not kind of redoing or raising these existing neighborhoods. It's actually often improving them and creating new housing forms that are also satisfied to the people that are existing in those neighborhoods. So I'll get you on the next slide. It's a bit more of the same, but This sort of phenomenon is just not something that's specific to Vancouver. In fact, it's happening really across North America. And so you'll hear things like the banning of single family neighborhoods or the banning of single family zoning. It's not quite as nefarious as that, but it's really speaking to this idea of how we can build more homes in single family neighborhoods on traditional single family communities in a way that is, again, very appealing to people that control and live in those single family neighborhoods. But also it's important to the cities that are trying to deal with growth, places like Toronto and Vancouver and San Diego and others. They're really begging for these kind of missing middle forms that can really do a bit of the heavy lifting that we need for new housing types. The next slide, please. So we've been really kind of focused on this sort of Cascadia region, this kind of West Coast corridor. So for us in Vancouver, it started again 10, 15 years ago with the lane home policy. And now today it's emerging as something called Bill 44, which is a provincial bill that allowed for this gentle density, this up to four homes on a single family lot. And really what this is kind of speaking to is a lot of the sort of early work of gentle density and these new forms came at municipal levels, municipal changes to bylaws and municipal regulation that happened in places that were maybe sometimes progressive or have planning offices that can handle sort of OCP changes and such. But it was hard to have that sprinkled into some of the more rural communities and other communities because they just didn't have maybe the planning staff that a city of Vancouver has, or a city of Toronto, or a city of Los Angeles. And so increasingly, there's been these state regulations that have come in, whether it's state or provincial regulations that are really allowing for this type of housing across all municipalities, all communities within these states and regions. And so we've seen forms of this, Bill 44 in Vancouver, House Bill 1782 in Washington State, State Bill 2001 in Oregon, and State Bill 1069 in California. And so these are all different forms of really more than one home, typically up to 4 homes on single family lots. And they come in a variety of forms of like strata titling to create these multiple homes, or often things like lot splits. That's more common to the US, where a single family lot can be broken into 2 lots or multiple lots, and then those can be actually further sold or built upon after that. So next slide. Just a bit more detail on, so I'm going to probably just skip over this, but this is sort of the provincial, they call it the Homes for People Action Plan. It was a provincial policy that really kind of drove Bill 44. I won't go into any of the detail on these other bills, but they're all about different forms of density, transit-oriented density and others. But we're kind of really concentrated on this support small-scale multi-unit housing, sometimes called SMU, on traditional single-family development lots, Bill 44. So I'll get you on to the next slide. So Bill 44, as I said, it's this idea of as of right zoning for 3 to 4 homes on single-family lots and up to 6 on lots that are close to frequent transit networks. There are things within Bill 44 that talk about provincial minimums for height, density, and setbacks, some of the regulation that will help guide things like local OCPs. But the big sort of like stick approach by the province on this was that they really mandated that all municipalities more than 5,000 people had to adhere or apply these new bylaws, these new rules to their local planning areas. And so this came in effect in June of this last year. And as the stat said, there's it's been fairly smooth to see municipalities adopt this. And one of the sort of, I think, uniquenesses, but one of the kind of good ideas that came out of this was that there's a lot of communities that I think want this, but they just didn't, again, have these like planning staffs that could go in and really like change their OCPs and rewrite a lot of their planning bylaws. And so being able to take a templated form of this at a provincial level and apply that to local communities kind of did a lot of the work for them, but also allowed for these new kind of opportunities to open up.
So Luke, I was just going to mention that this is Bill 44, which is the provincial legislation, but municipalities can in fact say you can go up to 6, 8 units as well. So
Yeah, very good point. Yeah, good point, Richard. And that's really what happened sort of in BC was the big municipality of Vancouver that kind of led the way in many senses to, again, start with things like a lane home policy and as of right opportunity to build a secondary dwelling on a single family lot, way back, 10, 15 years ago, to their form of this Plex policy that came in place, about the end of 2023, start of 2024. I don't know this to be the case, but my spidey sense is that a lot of the early work of the city of Vancouver helped to inform the province about how to really write Bill 44 and then apply that to other municipalities. But we've been at Smallworks very focused on the city of Vancouver. And as well as Burnaby, and both municipalities that are sort of the bigger cities of the province came out with their own changes at a municipal level that worked very closely with what Bill 44 does, but they kind of went out in front of what Bill 44 does and did their own municipal updates themselves. Next slide. So outside of Canada, the places to kind of really pay attention to, I would say, are both California and increasingly Washington State. But California started with this State Bill 9, and really the early sort of like big win of this was to allow these what they call ADUs. They don't have a lot of lanes in places like Los Angeles, like we have here in Vancouver, but these accessory dwelling units on single family lots across the state. And so a huge uptake of these, particularly in places like Los Angeles, where in fact in these municipalities there was more applications and permitted homes by way of ADU than almost all other forms of housing combined. So it I think many thought at a state level this was sort of a novelty, and it's really taken off, and it's allowed for things like people to build, to have multi-generational living, to bring in family members, to get rental income, to really sort of leverage land value in a way that wasn't there early on, and by way of this sort of state change, there's been kind of interesting things happening at an entrepreneurial level. Lots of these startups that specialize in building ADUs for folks and looking at ways to do that in factories by using modular construction, other things like that. And they've just they sprouted up everywhere. And so what the big sort of difference, I would say, in the US to Canada is typically these idea of ADUs is sort of what we would call lane homes and our plexes all in one. So these accessory dwelling units were really kind of full lot redevelopment, sometimes 2, 3, or multiple ADUs on a single family lot. That we here in BC are increasingly calling things like plexes, which is a duplex, a triplex, a quadplex, as well as a lane home that is a detached unit, where in the US ADUs is almost kind of like referred to as, sometimes they call them in places like Washington, they call them DADUs, which are detached ADUs, or ADUs, which are the attached ADUs, and they can be within existing homes built as secondary dwellings on new builds, or just typical detached ADUs. And we'll go to the next slide. So the other thing I wanted to kind of quickly chat with you about. So this sort of shift for us at Smallworks has been around. We were very focused on lane homes and as I call them, ADUs in other parts of the world. But like I said, we're starting to get a lot of interest in now plexes. So building more than just a detached home. And so in BC with a plex, if you build 4 units on a single family lot, you can subdivide those 4 units and sell 3 of them and keep 1. And it's become this really kind of interesting way of pulling equity, pulling cash out of your existing single family home, which has been really problematic for people that are, maybe in like at the place in their life where they're thinking about downsizing. They again are kind of ready to move into something that's a little more right sized to their life. But other than selling and moving, there hasn't been a good way of sort of bringing equity out. And so now with these plexes, you can, like I said, if you take a typical single family lot in Vancouver, which is about 4,000 feet, as of right, you're soon to be able to build 4,000 feet back in 4 units. You can keep one of those 1,000 square foot units for yourself and sell the other 3,000 feet. And it's become this sort of new way of maybe creating some new value and wealth that can be used for other parts of your life that was otherwise trapped in a home that was good for you for paying down your mortgage, but you've kind of got all that trapped value and trapped equity that you can't otherwise use, and maybe in a house that is starting to fall apart and starting to need some serious maintenance and not the right place for you. So we've got a lot of people that are interested in plexing now, and our business model is really around working with homeowners to unlock that development value. And so we are really a full service shop. We're a design builder first and foremost, but we're also a development partner, in that we will help you go through the entitlement process and get your permits in place, and increasingly look for ways to help pay for this development. So I thought it would be a good spot for me just to quickly talk about some of the costs that are going into plexes today in the Vancouver market. So this sort of pie chart is just kind of explaining the big components of costs that are typical within development of a plex. And so the first one, I'll get you going on the next slide, Liza, is land. Land in Vancouver is still extremely expensive. It's extremely kind of sticky priced asset. There's been high interest rates in the last number of years, but we haven't seen a real shift down in land costs. And now with some of the extra density and sort of developability of land, we still see land price being by far the biggest component of plexes. It also, in many senses, in most parts of Vancouver, is really, really hard to pencil out for a performer if you have to buy land at today's value, and pay for all the input costs and then still sell it at a market value. So I'll walk through what that looks like. But what that really means is, for the people that bought these lots and homes 30, 40 years ago, there's a tremendous opportunity. For the people that have to go buy these lots today, the margin's pretty thin in order to make these things work. And so it creates a pretty interesting opportunity for incumbents, but a much harder opportunity for kind of new entrepreneurs in the Vancouver context. So land acquisition, that's the big one. And you can skip down to the next slide, Liza. Land costs by itself are, at least $500 a foot or more in most neighborhoods across Vancouver. Some of the other costs that are typical to a development performance, we have typical land costs, soft costs, development costs, financing costs, and operating costs. And so the soft costs is sort of the smallest of the pie chart, but it's something to consider, and it's something to consider because it's typically what you need to kind of have available in working capital. It's hard to finance a lot of the soft costs on a project. You can get increasingly there's ways to finance construction costs by way of bank financing, but soft costs are the things that you're going to have spent in order to get to a place where you can start construction, where you have an approved design and you're shovel ready. So there's designs, whether it's architects and different consultants that you have to use in order to get to, an approved design, warranty costs for anything that you're going to be selling and bringing to market, appraisal costs. We'll skip down to the next one. And then the thing that everyone complains about today are the municipal fees. So the permit fees, things like in Vancouver, there's density bonusing fees. So to allow you to build a plex on a single family lot, you'll have to pay a density bonus depending on which part of the city that you're in. That can be the bit of the range. There's we call them shallow service and site costs that relates to bringing in servicing, whether it's electrical and sewer and water to your new build, property taxes that need to get capitalized while you're still working through the project, and development cost levies both at a metro level and municipal level. Skip to the next slide. some of the other soft costs. So these can kind of range, $100 to $150 a foot after you're all said and done. They kind of are the things that people sometimes forget about, but on a 4,000 foot home, they can be a big number. And like I said, they're ones that you typically have to think about how you're going to cash flow these, because they're hard to finance. And so you kind of have to have these available to the project before you can really kind of start construction. We'll skip down to the next slide. So hard costs, that's the construction cost. That's the stuff that you'll typically pay a place like Smallworks to build what you want to build on your site. We're sort of in this range of about $425 a foot with our fees and everything else involved. I think people, get a little bit of sticker shock with those numbers, but I can tell you that this has been one of the areas that has been hammered by inflation over the last couple of years, both in commodity costs, but also in labor. It's really hard to get quality labor to work in places like Vancouver, and that's because it's a very expensive place to live. And so you can, this is sort of the really the bottom of the range when you're talking about a high quality build in a place like Vancouver. Skip to the next slide. Financing costs, these are getting better, but they're still not great. And really what I wanted to kind of share here is that the big sort of capital cost to a performance, to a development is the construction financing. And so expect things like prime plus 2-3%. And this is the one that is difficult to qualify for. So though you have all the equity typically in your home, if you paid down your financing, getting a bank to be comfortable financing your project, which is going to be 4,000 square feet. We'll show you this what it comes to, but in the millions of dollars to get a mortgage in the millions of dollars. Not only do they want to see that value is in what you're going to be building and potentially bringing to market, but also, do you have any experience doing something like this? And do you have other forms of income that can help support this financing if you can't sell quite as quickly? And it's because it's construction financing, it's typically sort of the highest price of the financing that would come into a project. And keep going.
I'm just going to interject while we switch slides. I'm really, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm going to have to slip away because we have a staff event that I just need to stick my head into. So I'm going to leave you with Luke. But certainly we're really open, or I'm open for any further questions as time goes on. So thank you, everybody. And Luke, I'll just catch up with you afterwards. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake. Nice to meet you briefly. And I know we'll be chatting a lot more in the new year.
I look forward to it. Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Enjoy your party.
Okay, thanks. Okay, bye.
So this last slide, and I spent a bit too long on these, but I just wanted to kind of summarize all these sort of I call them the four levers of development of building housing, but land costs, soft costs, hard costs, and financing costs. These kind of all, this is what you can kind of expect. And so the one advantage to people that obviously own their lots is maybe they bought their homes for hundreds of thousands of dollars 30 or 40 years ago. So they have a way different cost basis for land. But if you're going to go buy a lot in Vancouver, that's sort of the bottom of the market right now for what you can expect to pay for a typical size lot. And you can see when you add these together, you're not leaving a lot left over for profit margin today. I mean, there's certainly places that are selling for well over $1,100 a square foot in Vancouver. But to take on an endeavor or a project like this without a significant profit margin is not an easy thing. And so this is why we think there's a really big opportunity to really partner with people that own land, because they bought their land at a different time, but they also have a need to create housing for themselves that can be factored into this, that is different than saying, I just want to go and speculate and buy a lot in Vancouver and sell these out. Now, there's certainly going to be buyers of homes like this because there's not a lot of housing in this form coming to market. And there's lots of opportunities outside of the west side of Vancouver to buy land and do these projects. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that you can really do this across BC in multiple municipalities. So part of the game here is looking at places. We always look at what's the selling price per foot versus the land price per foot. What's that delta? Where can we maximize that? And those are sort of the municipalities, the communities that really kind of speak to some interesting opportunities. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of share why we're in this space. Number one is that it's becoming a big thing, and it's becoming a thing because it's quickly kind of marching towards this idea of what I call outright approval. We don't have to go and work with the municipality for a long period of time to go through a rezoning and go through a really protracted permitting process, and sometimes a risky process that is, maybe has to go through a public hearing. This is something you can do as of right. The other thing that's sort of paralleling this is, as we get to places like Vancouver and Burnaby and others where we have a lot of standard lot sizes, being able to have an as of right approval for a 4,000 foot plex starts to kind of lead to this opportunity around standard designs and standard housing that we can maybe get some efficiencies on by way of moving to offsite construction. And that was what we were chatting about earlier in the call, Liza, about us looking at what's happening in Europe and other places around more factory production of housing, because this is some of the innovation that needs to come into this sector that hasn't been there for a while. But as we get to places like we are now, where we have outright approval and increasingly standard designs, you can start thinking about a whole kind of industry that's coming forward with being able to manufacture a lot of this housing that we need.
Absolutely. Just to jump in, we've been talking about what's coming very soon, which we know is going to be the robotic AI manufacturing facility, right? Which is going to have 24/7 building, and yeah, you'll be able to flat pack your house and let's put it up. Gosh, I mean, for me, there were so many things that you talked about that are really great threads that we can pull on. And I know Richard's going to jump in a minute, but a couple of things that I wanted to just kind of highlight. I love the trapped value, right? There's so many people who have property, and again, being the founder of WREN, the Women's Real Estate Network, so many women are fearful of tapping into equity. And so many women are also looking at the longevity, they're living for a longer time. You guys have all heard me say it before. The average age of a widow in Canada is 56 years old. Women can expect to spend anywhere from 10 to 30 years single, and they're going to be spending it with probably their girlfriends and their community. So I love the application for getting your group of friends together and building your sixplex, or building your co-housing, or your tiny home village, right? I just there's so many applications that work so well for what we're doing, and tapping into some of that equity. I was writing down, I think I have at least 3 properties that I think this would work for. So we've got our Vancouver, they're all on Vancouver Island, but the one of the things I'm interested in learning is the application for rural property, because the CRD, for example, the Capital Regional District, they've been notoriously locked up on what you can do. And I have a 10-acre property in Souk that could be much more efficiently used as a multi-generational plex, rather than a big single family home. So I mean, God, I'd love to do something on that. So I love all of the applications. I know we're going to get into a lot more detail in the new year, and I know the questions that are going to come up for sure are going to be capital raising for people who do want to start from scratch and buy land. So maybe that's going to be in Quebec or Moncton with Darlene, like we've talked about. Rental properties, right? We know that there are going to be people who are going to be wanting to build rentals, and so does CMHC have any programs to support? So we'll talk about that in the new year as well. But yeah, in the meantime, fantastic. I mean, just it gets us going. And Richard, I know you're going to add some layers to this with the new strata piece. So why don't we let you jump in, and then I'm sure we'll have some questions for afterwards.
Yeah, so I think one of the big changes that has been taking place is a recognition that to make this work, you really need to allow for stratification. We have been working under a co-ownership model, and the co-ownership model will still be applicable when you're talking about taking an old building and having 4 units in the old building. But most of the focus is going to be around new build, which may be partial new build, partial old, and the right to stratify. Because what that does, it enables people to come together, redevelop a property, say, well, I'll take 2 of these units, you'll take 1, someone will take 3, and we each will have our own mortgage security, which is absolutely essential to make this work. And so the city of Vancouver understood that. And I think most of the municipalities understand that. I know as we've talked before, Liza, is that the province wasn't ready to mandate strata, but their policy documentation clearly indicates this is what they want to see. And I think we're all very, very confident that if municipalities play games, the province will step in and mandate. They certainly would be ready to do that. So I think it opens great opportunities for investors and families and friends to come together and redevelop. And quite frankly, I am a partner with Luke and Jake and another person, Akua, in Smallworks. And the beauty of that organization, we're also tied in with Van City and RBC, both with mandates to really move forward on supporting this sort of redevelopment of property. And once you get those 2 major players moving, then everyone else has to follow suit. We'll start to see some of these capital market folks stepping in as well to really start this off, because there could be some good flexible returns from that. So lots of new opportunities that didn't exist. And whenever I talk about this, I smile because, 10, 15 years ago, it was the baby boomers that were opposed to changing their neighborhoods. Now that they want to create opportunities for their children, all of a sudden the baby boomers are the YIMBYs where they used to be the NIMBYs. So it's great. So real exciting moment. This is a generational shift in redevelopment of properties. So very exciting.
That's so cool. I love that term. I don't think I've heard it before. IMBYs in my backyard. It's amazing. It's like the solution, right? Like that's it right there. The solution is IMBYism instead of NIMBYism. That's so awesome. So yeah, again, like the stratification, and Richard, you and I have talked about Crescent, and we talk about how the Crescent property makes such a good case study. It's an old 8-unit apartment building, and we own it in a corporate structure, and we want to redevelop it, and we want to stratify it, and we've potentially got we had an idea in mind that didn't quite work, and so now we're revamping everything, and so I think it makes a really good case study. So Luke, we're going to be having some chats to see if we can get you over to Vancouver Island, and we'll talk about the Crescent project. But yeah, again, so many opportunities. I love the applications for so many different things, the multi-generational families, the getting your friends together, the baby boomers who now want to help their kids, right? That whole concept was just crazy a few years ago. And I can think of probably 10 or 15 people who are sitting on amazing properties in Vancouver. And I mean, these are some people who bought like 50, 60 years ago. They bought a lot. One of my friends has a property, I think it's on Waterloo, close to Broadway. I think they bought it in the 50s for $30,000. I think it's now worth close to $2-3 million, and they've never taken equity out of it, and it's a lot and a half. So it's like, oh my God, you want to get your hands on that, right?
Well, there's in my practice, I've got clients that, older clients that they bought their first place in the 40s and 50s, then they bought another place. And I had one gentleman come in and I added it all up, and this old fellow was worth $60 million because he just invested in real estate, and he still cuts the lawns in his investment.
Wow.
He's at the age of 86 or whatever. So this
Amazing.
this does create that opportunity for investors as well. Just say, hey, you know what? Maybe in Vancouver, to build as investors in flip might not make sense. May make sense further out, but it certainly would make sense to build and long-term holds where each investor owns one or two of the units and they say, you know, this is my future wealth. But you know, it's lots of clients that I have, women clients who go, yeah, Richard, I got lots of women friends. We all have our own apartments, and we think that eventually someone's going to need some care. And so coming together with projects like this is a great opportunity for so many different people. So it's
Yeah,
great.
absolutely. And as Hong is on the call right now, and she did a cash flow crunch for us a couple weeks ago, and I wanted her to analyze a couple of existing properties. Hong, I think one of the ones we looked at was like a 9-unit co-living facility that was for sale on Commercial Drive, near Commercial Drive. And I think, you know, we looked at it and the cost was, you know, really it didn't really work. And it was 9 sort of bedrooms in a what they were calling a co-living space. But the gentleman who had built it, I mean, he had built it with every ounce of heart and soul, and overspent and overbuilt, and started it before the pandemic. And so for him to even try to break even is going to be really difficult. But doing something like this in Vancouver with a property that maybe was something like what they were trying to do, but maybe not the situation that he did it and ended up with this. I think he's at like a cost of somewhere around $4 million. And that's just like the build, like it was just outrageous how much money they spent. But yeah, so again, it's a good opportunity to take what we're going to be doing in the new year, run some numbers and do some comparisons, right? Like here's an existing property that's going to need renovations in the future. It might not be ideal, you know, you're gonna be sort of chopping up and trying to create something out of something that's not ideal. Whereas when you get your friends together and you find the right piece of land, you can build something that's custom for you, and that's, like you say, you know, this is going to be a long-term buy and hold that you're going to retire into. So I like the opportunities that are coming, and yeah, it just seems to work really well for all of the things that our group talks about. And I'm excited about getting out of province as well. So it's going to be, you know, where do we start that kind of is going to be the low hanging fruit where we can get a good property cost and do kind of a first case study and use that to the nth degree as a great case study, and then show
Okay,
what's
so
possible. So
Luke, so I've already heard this a whole bunch of times from Liza, so I hope you're hearing this, Luke. She wants to
yeah,
go east. She wants to go east. She
yep,
wants to go west.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we want to be on the island, and we promised Darlene we'd go and do something in Moncton. So the land costs in Moncton just make so much sense, right? And the economy's growing out there. So I think it's a good idea to have a look out there. So does anybody have any questions? I know, as I said, we had a small group tonight, but I know there's going to be lots of people who are going to be looking at the recording and asking lots of questions as we get set up for the new year.
So I
Yeah,
can,
go ahead, Hong.
yeah. So a couple of the investors I know who are doing the partnering up on the multi-units. So they're, you know, partnering up with buying the land and then building these multi-units. And it's interesting how you're presenting, Luke, the, you know, 1,122 square foot costs with everything all built in. And, you know, and the real estate agent that's involved in these deals are actually saying, hey, you know what, we're coming in, we're building it for like 400 or 500 square feet, and we're going to be able to make and sell it for, you know, 13. Right. And so you think there's this huge markup, this gain, but there's actually isn't that much once you take in all of the soft costs and all of the financing costs that goes into it. So I'm just surprised at how a lot of the investors are coming into this thinking there's a lot of money to be made, when if you look at the numbers the way you presented it, it doesn't look that way.
And the land. I mean, the land's such a big one. So I mean, you know, it's pretty hard to even find a 4,000 square foot lot that's anything decent in Vancouver for $2 million, and that's $500 a foot right there. So the better the land, the more that you're going to have to add to that. So This has been our sort of observation so far in Vancouver is there was, in some ways a little bit of irrational exuberance about, well, all these things are selling for $1,200-$1,300 a square foot. And it only costs, $400 a foot to build. There's all this profit, but you got to buy that land still. And so we've seen people that have gotten into these deals that they're finding now that's like, oh well, I own this land and it's kind of hard for me to get me back. I always call these, these are residual land analysis. Like you kind of know what you should pay for the land by the time that you say, I could sell it for this. This is what it's going to cost me to build. What should I have paid for the land? And that's often less than what the market value is. But I say all that, like, it still is becoming an interesting time to buy. There's way more for sale now than there's ever been before, and there's lots of people that have been in trouble, and so I think there are opportunities. It's just it's not quite as eye opening as people make it seem from a distance once you get into the real details of it.
Yeah, it's interesting comparing the opportunities, because I'm doing an 8-plex built in Edmonton. And the cost of the land was like 250,000, and the build cost is under 250 a square foot, right? And so you can't even compare.
Yeah.
Right. So interesting.
And again, like as Hong was saying, like, how many times have we heard realtors talking about how you can make this work in Vancouver, and you can still make a profit on it. And I know, it's always different when you hear it from a realtor or from someone with a real estate background, because they don't tend to look at the worst case scenario, right? Unless they've been in the development game for a long time, and they are also investors and developers and have that scope. But yeah, it's amazing to hear how many realtors are saying, "Oh yeah, you can get this done for," as Hong was saying, like 400 per square, and off you go to the races. It's going to be nothing but gravy. So it's good to hear the reality from someone you've been doing this for how long did you say you've been building with Smallworks now, like the laneway homes? And
we've been around for about 15 years. I think that we're very well positioned to know how to and what to build on lots. We're very we're not really looking at doing big assemblies and doing bigger buildings and bigger projects. We are very, very focused on exactly what you can build, what's the best product, what's the most livable product that you can build on a single family lot. We kind of it's sort of an internal motto, but we really are focused on building everything on a single family lot other than a single family home. And that's really, that speaks to what we've become very good at doing over the last number of years.
Awesome. Bye, Hong. We'll see you later. Hong just mentioned she's got to pop off. Robert, I think I saw your hand up for a question.
No, it was just applause. It was great presentation.
Okay, there you go. Good. An applause is good too. So Robert, are you out in Quebec now? Is that right?
That is correct. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And Robert is anxious
3 years ago.
Robert is anxious to get building something. He's at that time where it's like, okay, now's the time. And so I knew that he would be interested in hearing this. And so he and I are gonna have a chat. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what land costs are in Quebec and where exactly you're looking. So definitely.
A little bit more affordable, we'll just say that.
Yeah, a little bit more affordable than Vancouver and Vancouver Island.
Yeah, I could probably get an 8-plex for the price of land in Vancouver, just saying.
Yeah, exactly. Very cool. Great. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I know, as I mentioned, I know that we're going to be talking a lot in the new year, and Richard, we've got lots. I think they've sent Richard a few emails that go like this, because of course he knows I'm in Mexico, and we're also looking at potentially buying boutique hotels down here that we can monetize and then eventually turn into our own little retirement getaways for when we need to get away from our 6 or 8-plex that we have finished building with Smallworks, and we want to come away for someplace nice and sunny. So we're talking about all kinds of things there as well. And for Luke and Jake, thank you so much for opening our eyes to, again, we're just, we just want to keep reminding people of what's possible, because a lot of people kind of ran away from real estate over the last couple of years. And now we can see that because of the change of policies, because of the opportunities, because of this in particular, it's going to allow some things to actually work again. So I think there's a lot of excitement around there. So I can't wait to chat with everybody more about what the possibilities are for the new year. So on that note, I think we'll, Richard, did you have anything you wanted to add? Looked like you were
No,
going to add something there.
no, I was
Okay.
just about to go. I just came back from Cambodia, so I was just about to do this.
Oh, that's right. That's right. There we go. So, as I say, we're going to have the recording available. We'll put it out. We'll get a couple of little edits made and we'll pop that out for our members. And I think just to finish off, we're going to take a little bit of a social media break over the holidays just to give everybody a little breather. So we probably won't do much posting between the 23rd and the 27th, just to give, and I'm going to take a social media break. I'm going to do a social media detox for a few days over the holidays. And so we're not going to have cash flow crunch on the 1st of January, because it is the 1st of January, but we are getting straight back into our happy hours. So the happy hours are across Vancouver, Victoria, and Toronto. And generally they're at Tap and Barrel in Toronto, they're at Lure in Vancouver, and they are at Mimos Co-Living in Toronto. And so, gentlemen, if you want to pop out and meet some of the ladies and talk more about Smallworks and Bell Alliance, January 11th. I can't believe I'm saying January. It's January 2025 in a couple of weeks. So that will be happening, and we'll pop all of that in the newsletter, and then we'll be right back into the spring schedule, the winter and spring schedule. So obviously we're going to jump into some RSP situations. We've got Lynn coming in from Raintree Financial Solutions to talk about what else you can invest your RSP in. There's probably some things that will be RSP eligible in some of these types of projects. We've already been hearing about that. So if you don't want to just stick to the regular GICs and RSPs, you can get yourself self-directed and get invested in some other projects. Obviously, tax time, we'll be talking about some tax strategies, which we know there have been so many changes in tax policies and tax strategies. My colleague from RealFile, David Poutanen, out in Toronto, who does cross-border accounting. He was with CRA for 14 years, and he's had a real estate focused accounting agency for years now. And he was saying the last 2 years, the most challenging thing is what's expected of business people and small business owners and individuals, because we are just being like scrutinized to death. And so all of the things that we have to provide for the government, it's just so much more than it used to be. And it's just causing so many people more stress. So we need to be ready for those. Hopefully some of those will go away in the next couple of years. But so we'll do tax strategies. Obviously, we'll talk a lot more about some investments coming up in the new year. We'll be talking more with Richard's team about some things that we're going to be working on with their team. And just lots more general stuff to get us rolling into what will hopefully be a turnaround year for those of us who have been kind of waiting for the real estate picture to get a little bit brighter and kinder and gentler and maybe a little bit more fun. So there we go. So if everybody's good for tonight, we'll sign off and we will, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm seeing this. We'll see you in 2025.